When Montana's Water Rights Act was passed in 1973, it required all new uses of water to go through a rigorous permitting process. However, users who plan to withdraw a small enough amount of water are allowed to drill exempt wells, which are not subject to the water rights process. As Montana PBS's Sam Wilson reports, the exemption has become a point of contention.
Up here at the top of the continent, water shapes everything, from the mountains to the rivers to the way we build our communities.
I think we, especially in Montana, we're fortunate to get out on our streams and our rivers and our lakes, and we develop this relationship or this intuitive sort of understanding of how surface water works. We don't have any kind of connection really with groundwater like we do with surface water, and so it gets ignored, and it's just not as well understood. But it's important to recognize that there's a tremendous amount of water in the subsurface, especially in the basins in western Montana.
Exempt wells are meant to give Montanans a quick way to access a de minimis or insignificant amount of that water that has been determined to be less than 35 gallons per minute and no more than 10 acre-feet a year, which could supply water for up to 35 average Montana homes. And as surface water becomes harder to come by, use of exempt wells has boomed.
Throughout the whole scheme of my career, it's been probably 95% of the work we've ever done has been exempt wells.
Though the vast majority of the roughly 130,000 exempt wells in the state are for domestic use, they can also be used for stock ponds or for irrigating landscaping like this well will be used for. These wells can also be drilled in basins where all water rights have long been claimed, like in the Gallatin River Aquifer, where 220 exempt wells have been recorded per square mile. And there's the rub. One well might just be a drop in the bucket, but the math changes when thousands of wells draw from the same aquifer.
This tension between protecting those senior water right holders while allowing for new uses and development, and really trying to figure out what is de minimis, or that small amount. We've got multiple decades of evolution here. We've seen this state really grapple with how much water is allowed.
One sticking point is the combined appropriation of wells. A parcel of land can be granted an exemption, but what about when that parcel is subdivided into many lots? That fight has been hashed out in court.
But the court also recognized that you can't stack one de minimis exception on top of another to the tune of thousands of wells and keep this status of de minimis. That is truly a large water use.
In 2024, the Horse Creek Hills subdivision near Townsend became a cautionary tale for developers using the exemption. The 442-acre tract on the shores of Canyon Ferry Lake was planned to be split into 4 phases, with one exemption allocated for each phase. After the subdivision was approved by Broadwater County, the Upper Missouri Waterkeepers sued, arguing the law only allowed a single exemption for the entire subdivision. The district court agreed, saying the DNRC had violated broad swaths of the Water Use Act, and in doing so, allowed the ongoing appropriation of millions, if not billions, of gallons of water that under our laws should have been left in aquifers for the benefit of senior water rights holders.
But I do think that it would be really wise for us to consider how we can get a handle on the cumulative impacts that we're having with exempt wells. Right now, every decision is based on like a very narrow, this instant, and does it fit in this definition? And it does not take into account the 20,000 decisions before.
Near Bozeman, the Sandhill subdivision proposed drawing even more water than Horse Creek Hills for fewer lots. But after the Gallatin County Commission unanimously voted it down, developers came back with a new plan that put all 160 acres and 34 lots under one exemption of 10 acre-feet. While Horse Creek Hills is still rangeland, construction on Sandhill begins this year.
It's a really great example right now of a development that is adapting to the arid environment that we live in. I think it will end up being a good project.
In the 2025 legislative session, a bill led by the DNRC tried to clear things up. Among other things, Senate Bill 358 would have closed the exemption in the Helena, Gallatin, Bitterroot, and Missoula aquifers, while expanding its use for new subdivisions and much of the rest of the state. Over 200 people attended its introduction to the legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name's Tyler Sampson, S-A-M-P-S-O-N, owner and operator of Bridger Drilling in Belgrade, Montana, and vice president of the Montana Water Well Drillers Association. And I oppose this bill.
People need water. Even if you shut it down, even if you do people are still going to come here and people are still going to need water. The problem is they're probably not going to move into Gallatin County. They're going to be moving to Three Forks and Annis and Livingston and all the places you guys didn't cover with the red blotches.
Frankly, we were aligned with the well drillers, the Upper Missouri Waterkeeper. The intent was we didn't like the bill and wanted to kill it, and by God, the well drillers also didn't like the bill and wanted to kill it. Different reasons. In fact, we're on the opposite side of the issue entirely, but you don't have to be in one of those basins to be impacted by a subdivision development that goes on next to your property. The Horse Creek Hills, for example, is Confederate Gulch. I mean, there's been multiple lawsuits and court decisions protecting senior water rights in Confederate Gulch, and now Horse Creek comes along and tries to take 40 acre-feet out of the system without review. And, you know, you've been fighting it for it your whole life, and then these guys just are proposing to pop in 4 wells and nobody's going to protect you? Well, 358 didn't protect them. They still would have to sue.
The bill never made it out of the Senate, and the question remains, how much do these exempt wells actually affect the availability of water?
What makes this difficult in terms of trying to address this problem is that groundwater is connected to surface water. We know that. We know that the flow in the streams is reliant upon those groundwater discharges. But groundwater responds, much more, it responds very differently than surface water. Groundwater is moving, but it moves at rates that are much slower than surface water. We've seen a lot of development with domestic wells in the western part of the state, and we've been watching water levels. For the most part, we see things respond to climate. There was a big drought in the early aughts, the early 2000s. The Madison limestone up by Great Falls, water levels started dropping rather precipitously. And at the same time, the number of wells going into that aquifer almost doubled. And so it raised some alarms. It's like, are we taking more water out of this aquifer than is coming in? Are we causing depletion? And then after about 7 years, climate turned around. The wells still kept going in, but the water levels recovered. They came back up 30 feet, and they were almost higher than when we first started monitoring this, even though the development still continued at the same pace. So it became pretty clear that it's climate that controls the amount of water in this aquifer, and we see similar things in a lot of the basin fill aquifers in western Montana as well. Because conditions develop much more slowly in groundwater systems, by the time you start to see it, sometimes then it can be almost like too late. It's like this slow-moving freight train, right? That you see it, but you can't just like slam the brakes on it.
Groups like the Upper Missouri Waterkeepers say they are already seeing red flags on the surface.
We know by experience our streams are being depleted earlier, and it's not just drought effects. In the Gallatin River, if you don't have a water right that's pre-1890, you are shut off by the end of July in almost all years, and now are being shut off as early as the end of June with droughty conditions and early spring runoff. So that water is being used. Don't pretend that pumping groundwater and consuming it doesn't impact your surface water right holders. It does.
At the county level, there are more factors to consider than just the availability of groundwater. Though it can be expensive to tie into your municipal water or sewer system, raw land is even more expensive, and exempt wells are often used in big lots for big houses.
Any development that is on a parcel with an individual well and septic is not affordable in our county. That is just how the economics work. Affordable units in our community are in town. They are serviced by municipal water and sewer, and they are often multifamily units. That's what hits, if we're lucky, an affordable price.
And you could build all the condos and apartments you want, but that's only going to attract a certain type of people. And not a lot of people move to Montana to live in an apartment, I don't think.
But a lot of people are moving to Montana, and finding legally available water for everyone remains the crux. Though no exempt well bills passed this session, the DNRC is looking at other ways of reducing reliance on the exemption, including making it easier for existing water rights to change hands, say from an irrigator to a municipality or subdivision.
It is not a conversation about exempt wells, not exempt wells. It's about a holistic package of meeting our future water needs. If we need to continue to refine the permit process to make that easier, let's do that. How do we make mitigation and the availability and the flexibility around existing uses so that we can have a market around water use and mitigation a reality for Montana? That's going to help us meet our needs. I continue to think about storage as an essential component, particularly around the timing and availability of water. Let's continue to build that out. And we're continuing to be committed to that collaborative process.
Finding common ground will be an enduring challenge for the Montanans invested in that process.
It's not just me. There's quite a few other well drillers out there, contractors, and they're drilling every single day. And there's guys older than me that have been doing it since they were as young as I started. Nobody ever said, well, the whole subdivision's going dry. Never once did they ever say that.
If you want to grow 100 acres of alfalfa new, you have to come through the water right permit process. If your neighbor under the exception wants to irrigate 100 acres of bluegrass, Kentucky bluegrass in lawns, use the exception. That's just not fair, and it's not fair in Helena, Bozeman, Billings, Kalispell, Missoula, Great Falls. It doesn't matter where you are. It's just not fair.
We're in the early stages of conflict and scarcity in Montana, and we are now experiencing that persistent drought. We are experiencing that high population change. We are not so far down the line that the courts are the only ones driving those solutions. And so being in Montana and water is a great time and place because we can still control our fates and futures.
For Impact, I'm Sam Wilson.
The debate around groundwater pumping is not unique to Montana, and the problem is becoming so severe in places like California and Utah that the ground is caving in under farms and neighborhoods. And at that point, the issue becomes much more expensive and difficult to solve.